Literary interpretation can be both frustrating and a bit mysterious, even for experienced readers. Many students don't know where to begin. Others worry about getting to the right interpretation. Still others think that the meaning of a literary text is totally subjective, just a matter of opinion. This video introduces you to an interpretive method called close reading. This method has been central to literary studies for nearly a century and is still foundational for most university-level English classes. What follows, then, will help you demystify literary interpretation and prepare you to offer your own close readings. Students often think about literary texts in terms of broad generalizations.
What are this text's universal themes? How is it relevant to my personal life? What does it add up or boil down to?
These questions can be a valuable part of the reading experience. However, they lead students to rush to judgment and neglect the most important part of literary interpretation, namely, figuring out how a literary text works, that is, how it creates its meanings and effects. The close reading interpretive tool, CRIT for short, provides a systematic approach to literary analysis. The CRIT process has 6 steps that allow you to practice the detailed, sustained, and careful analysis of a text. To practice, that is, close reading. Those steps are paraphrase, observe, contextualize, analyze, argue, and reflect. And they can help you to close read any small selection of a literary text. Let's see an example of the CRIT process at work. When I Heard the Learned Astronomer is a well-known poem by Walt Whitman, published in 1867. Here's a recent recitation of the poem from an unexpected source.
When I heard the learned astronomer, when the proofs, the figures were ranged in columns before me, when I was shown the charts and the diagrams to add, divide, and measure them, when I, sitting, heard the astronomer where he lectured, with much applause in the lecture room, how soon, unaccountable, I became tired and sick, till rising and gliding out, I wandered off by myself in the mystical, moist night air, and from time to time looked up in perfect silence at the stars. Yes, I am a nerd.
Bravo.
Thank you.
So let's begin with a paraphrase of When I Heard the Learned Astronomer. Here, we will read the poem for its factual content only. That is, we will look for what the text directly says. What situation is being described here, and by whom? What happens in that situation? Fortunately, this poem offers a pretty straightforward narrative. The poem's speaker
Attends a lecture by a learned astronomer full of technical information, hears others applaud but finds himself bored, and walks outside and contemplates the stars silently by himself.
Easy enough. Now, in step 2, observe, let's think more about the poem's language and form. Now we will read the passage again, this time thinking about what its language and form seek to accomplish. What textual elements seem potentially significant here? By the way, step 2 is an ideal time to take out your pen and mark up the passage, even if you have to print off the text. As always, there are many things we could observe here. For instance,
despite being 8 lines long, the poem is a single sentence. Also, the first 4 lines begin with the same word, when. There seems to be a shift in vocabulary in the second half of the poem. It opens with words that are technical and quantitative, and it closes with words that are sensual and impressionistic. The unusual adjective unaccountable is used to describe the speaker just before he leaves the lecture hall. And finally, the very sound of the poem changes midway through. Once the I acts independently in line 5, that long I sound occurs 11 times in the final 4 lines.
observations like these will provide the building blocks for any analysis and argument that follows. Now it's time for step 3, contextualize, in which you'll consider context for the passage. Contexts are facts or broader circumstances external to a literary work that are important to its production, reception, or understanding. For instance, literary, biographical, political, or historical information. As in step 2, we're looking for potentially significant contexts. That is, those frames of reference that might contribute to the passage's overall meaning, purpose, or effect. In the case of When I Heard the Learned Astronomer,
we might think about Whitman's transcendentalist belief in a spiritual connection between nature and individual consciousness. Likewise, we might consider 19th century astronomy's impressive technical advances.
Contextualizations like these may provide additional building blocks for any analysis and argument that follows. Step 4, Analyze, asks us to review the features and context that we identified in steps 2 and 3 as being potentially significant, and then to explain how each is in fact significant. Here we'll ask, which of these features and contexts seem somehow connected, and in what way? Once we've selected at least 4 textual elements and/or contextual frames, we'll make analytical claims about their significance. For instance,
we could claim that the repetition of the word when at the beginning of each of the first 4 lines helps convey the speaker's boredom and impatience with the repetitive, data-stuffed lecture. We could also claim that the speaker's description of himself as unaccountable, with its root in the word count, helps explain why he finds the astronomer's mathematical approach to the stars so lacking. Additionally, we might claim that the shift from technical to sensory language conveys the speaker's change in mood as he escapes his passive role in the lecture hall and has a direct personal experience of the stars. Finally, we might claim that the poem's last line, in which the speaker and the stars are joined in perfect silent communion, illustrates Whitman's transcendentalist belief in a spiritual connection between nature and individual consciousness.
Having made all these analytical claims, now we can offer an interpretation of the passage as a whole. In step 5, Argue, we're asked to write one paragraph that builds upon our responses to the step 4 prompt, and indeed all of our work in the previous steps. Here's one such argument.
Walt Whitman's When I Heard the Learned Astronomer describes a simple incident, but in its 8 lines and single sentence, this poem conveys Whitman's transcendentalist belief that technical, quantitative analysis delivered via passive instruction cannot communicate true knowledge of the natural world. Whitman's division of the poem into 2 4-line sections that sharply contrast in diction, tone, and content contributes to the poem's implicit argument that we can only truly know the universe by means of an active, personal communion with nature.
At the end of the crit process comes step 6, in which we reflect on the interpretation we've just advanced. We should ask, what aspects of the passage remain confusing? What elements does our interpretation neglect or set aside? What parts of our argument now appear debatable or dubious? That is, what objections could a reasonable person raise about our interpretation? For instance,
why is it important that Whitman's poem is a single 8-line sentence? And what are we to do with the fact that the astronomer received much applause from the audience? Do these facts support our interpretation of the poem, or do they challenge it?
Keep in mind, no interpretation is perfect or can account for every element of a text. Nonetheless, if these reflections lead you to think that your interpretation is less than compelling, then revisit the previous steps and revise your close reading. So that's the process we call CRIT, the Close Reading Interpretive Tool. Again, you can use this systematic approach on any short selection of literary text. The online version of CRIT walks you through the 6 steps and allows you to submit your work electronically. You can also, of course, employ this process offline by simply following the 6 steps with paper and pen. No matter how you use CRIT, we're confident that it will make literary interpretation a less frustrating and mysterious task. Who knows? You might even enjoy it.